Because when we started touching in the office, I ran out of State Street, Michigan Ave. They closed PNC out
Oh,
there.
that would make sense. I can call about that.
But that one makes me a little bit nervous just because it's
600 grand.
super specific to areas
Yeah.
that it should be more generalized.
Yes.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is the Saline City Planning Commission for Wednesday, May 14th. Will the recording secretary please call the roll?
Young,
Here.
Carroll is absent. Fosdick,
Here.
Marl is absent. Gearbaugh,
Here.
Heft,
Here.
Lafort.
Staff present tonight are Community Development Director Atkin and Recording Secretary Katnick. Is there a motion on the table to approve the agenda as distributed unless there are amendments?
So moved as distributed?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of April 9th, 2025 as submitted unless there are amendments?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comments. The person is requested but not required to state their name and address for the record. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Did we receive any?
Yep, we just have the email comment from Mayor Marl, who won't be here tonight. He says, I have previously reviewed the proposed ordinance and have no objections. I'm hopeful it can be reviewed, approved by City Council in the near future.
Great, thank you. Unfinished business, 25-07, ordinance number 876, an ordinance to amend Appendix A, Section 2.01, rule applying to text, Section 2.02, definitions A through B, Section 2.04, definitions F through K, Sections 2.07, definitions S through W of Article 2, Section 5.03, accessory structures of the City of Saline zoning ordinance. We have a memo dated May 7th, 2025 from Community Development Director Atkin. Take it away.
I received an email after last meeting with some comments and suggestions. Those changes have been made. There were some grammatical errors that I didn't notice when I accepted all the revisions. It somehow put everything into one big definition. So all those, particularly for solar, so those have been corrected. And then there was a question on about the landscaping around. So a figure has been drawn, added, and expanded on for the landscaping. Now, I understand there were a number of questions that weren't brought up at the last meeting, so if we want to jump into those now, we just work our way through the ordinance, the proposed revisions, why these revisions are taking place. I'm happy to answer any of those questions.
Sure. Does anybody have any direct questions right now or changes that they see as to the ordinance or clarifications?
I only found a couple of nits, but the only, and I'll show it to you later. I'm not too worried about them. The only thing that I noticed that was sort of substantive, and I don't know if it was in the last one or if it wasn't, or if it wasn't, I just missed it, or if it wasn't, but on the definition of the personal scale SES, the second part of that definition looks like it's like a prohibition or like a requirement of how that has to be treated. And that felt to me like it's not, the definitional section is not the right place for limiting, like, or telling somebody how something has to be. I guess it would, maybe it was just the way it read, but it felt less like a part of the definition and more like a requirement or a prohibition of like treating that.
Could you just clarify where Article 2?
Sorry, yes, Section 207, definition M3 for solar energy systems, personal scale SES. And maybe it's just the wording, or maybe it's.
So in my experience with solar, not necessarily on personal scale, but large solar farm type, DTE consumers will purchase back any of the excessive. So if that is the case, if DTE is buying these back, they're not going to, on a personal scale, generally they're not going to, because they're not going to produce enough watts or whatever. It's just saying that it can be sold back as a primary use. So it's more for personal, you know, power your house. You can't push it back into the system.
Yeah, I just didn't know if like that's something that should be, like this should be left in just a definitional section, or if that's actually something, if you were telling them they can't use it in a certain way, that it actually needs to be like in a substantive.
In the ordinance itself.
Right, because since it's in definition, I worry that that's not going to be considered like operational language.
It can definitely be added, or something as simple as see definition for.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. So, because the word shall kind of tripped me up. So maybe it was just changing the way it was defined. But otherwise, if we're telling them they can't use it for the primary, you know,
Yeah,
the
you can sell it back, but it can't be.
right. The reason, the whole, yeah, I understand that. Then I don't know where else that would go, but it felt like that might be something that should be like in the ordinance itself,
Yeah.
in the actionable parts. But
Or no, I can't find it in the actual ordinance. Yeah, I can go through there and I guess the easiest thing to do in this case, considering that not enough power is going to be generated or stored in the personal scales, we can just wipe that section out. Not the definition, but just that last sentence.
So the M3 would now say personal scale SES, a ground-mounted or building-mounted SES that is accessory to the principal residential use on the parcel, period, end of sentence, end of definition.
Yes.
Ms. LaFord, are you okay with that?
I mean, I mean, as long as that's, you know, capturing, or that there's no concern, I think, you know, and you know better than I would, that there is a concern that anybody would ever be able to generate enough energy to do it, to use it for something else, and that city council wouldn't want it that way, then I mean, you know, I would defer that part to city council. But.
These, yeah, more, I guess, to better define them would be the roof mounted type. And typically when any power that excess power, there's battery backups and reserves that they store in house with cloud periods. So it's not enough. It would be a detriment to them having these and selling that power. So I can take that out.
I was just going to say, I mean, I can think of one or two examples where they actually were feeding power back to DTE, but isn't the primary or way the definition should be is that it is for personal use for that property only?
Yeah.
And define it that way or be more specific to that perspective?
Then they usually get a discount on their.
Right. No, I was just saying, do you want to put into the definition or something that makes it very much restricted to use for the building itself, or I don't know. Because I know what the issue is. You're trying to avoid somebody coming in with a commercial setup to generate power.
Yes. Yeah, putting a small building out there, and
Yeah.
the other 95% of the property is a farm, solar farm.
Wait, is besides the, I mean, we only have the little piece of it here. Besides the part where in 5.01, I got myself all mixed up. In the 5.0 where is it? 03G. Is that the only part that's, that actually has substantive solar panel provisions?
Yes.
Okay, so right now, the only solar panel provisions where there's restrictions in that way, except for the ones that are attached to the accessory dwelling. There's this provision where they're attached to accessory structures.
Yeah, roof mounted.
Right, so yeah, I guess the only other possibility would be to take, if you were really wanting to avoid that, would be to take that piece and, you know, wedge it into there and also wedge it into the accessory dwelling section to say like that this is in both, whether it's ground mounted or building mounted, it has to be incidental to the,
We're having H solar panels, roof mounted.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, or just, yeah, or H is, yeah.
So maybe in subsection M, in section under definitions in 2.07, solar energy systems, maybe that with what Dean was recommending, we put language in that definition that it is, I don't want to say proprietary to the parcel it is on or the lot that it's on, but it'll, I know what you're trying to say, I'm just trying to figure out the appropriate language. Or we could just take the sale and distribution, that last sentence in 3, and put it up under M.
Well, it's still in a definitional section, so that's still my problem. I wondered if maybe, I guess the other option would be like, I'm sorry, this is kind of like so technical, but I wondered if like maybe the other section would be like G becomes solar panels more broadly, and then there's the broad prohibition that you can't sell it back for, it has to be still incidental to this to the primary purpose, and then there's ground mounted subdivision specific requirements underneath that. So the solar panels generally are prohibited from
Is it primary use?
yeah, I wonder if that, I mean,
Well, I mean, it's all under accessory,
right,
so it has to be incidental to primary.
right. I mean, I guess maybe that's the thing, is that if depending on how you interpret that, could you say that because it has to be accessory to the principal residential use on the parcel, that is building in the idea that you're any selling back can only be incidental and can't be primary?
Yeah.
So maybe it's just redundant? I don't know. Like maybe that second part is just redundant in the sense that because it is already defined as being an accessory to the principal residential use, meaning you couldn't, like selling back any more than any amount that would be incidental and making it a primary use would actually not make this a personal scale SES anymore by definition.
Yeah, I mean, by definition, it isn't a residential, so it would, even if they did sell it back, if it gets to a point where it's, because this is really looking at the structure itself and everything, it's not like, my bigger concern is not necessarily the solar panels on a building, but it's the pole mounted ones standing in a yard.
So maybe that, I mean, I can see that definition. If the definition is accessory to the principal residential use on the parcel, then maybe that just builds that second part in, and we don't need that second part at all, because that by definition would mean you could not distribute excess energy as the primary purpose, because then it's not accessory anymore.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so solved, cut it out.
Take the last sentence out.
Yeah, that's my recommendation.
Does anybody have any comments about that?
That's fine with me. What was our former, for these pole mounted solar, and this just keeps coming up in my mind, did we have somebody already identifying that, or we're adding that in?
We're adding it in.
So if we didn't want to have that, I know there's an issue about allowing solar, and really was more the issue of allowing solar on buildings, panels, and that type of thing. it's really this concern of how many panels can you put within a yard? I mean, what would be the coverage if you were to put panels on a pole and everything? This goes back even with my wind generated issue that we don't really specify either. Because you can put a wind generator on a pole.
This one says it can't be greater. Oh, that's in
Well,
height.
the solar panels, since it's really the ground mounted, it's not really ground coverage. I mean, if they're on a pole, that's only taking up that much ground area that would be impermeable.
Right, but the panels could be significant in size and cover the entire
Yeah.
backyard.
Possibly, yes. Generally, in a residential, when the companies that go through will assess how much is necessary.
I mean, my thing with it is, are we adding something that we really don't need to add at this point where we really are more concerned about allowing for, I mean, it's an accessory structure, but does it need to be allowed if we allow them to put solar panels on their existing buildings?
Some don't have that option because they have to submit a structural engineer certification with it that it can support it. That tends to be a lot of weight, and the way they're fastened to them, they might not be able to put them on a roof, so they go to the ground mounted ones. Typically, they have to face south. If there's a lot of trees there, then
Yeah, for me, I guess it's understanding the coverage. Do we have any difference in the setbacks for those panels and everything else?
Yeah, it's in the last section that they have to be at least 10 feet away from the property line, I think.
5 feet from the rear.
Can we, because I know this is going to be an issue, can you identify that no more than a certain coverage of the lot can be done?
That might be overly restrictive from the standpoint that if they need a certain amount of panels, but they can't fit them.
I mean, where do you get to impervious surface? I mean, you now have panels that are going to be where water is going to be on them and everything else and all that. I just don't know. I mean, we really don't see that as in a big structure, like a big solar plant. I can't say what I want to say.
Solar farm.
Solar farm. But when you start looking at it, it's like, if you need to put your entire backyard into panels, I can't see that's something that a community is going to like as a standard.
Could you, I mean, I don't know what the actual size of panels or how many panels are needed generally for a home in our thing, but could you do something like you do with the accessory dwellings and accessory structures generally, where you have a max, depending on the lot size, you have a max?
And that was going to be my question. Does the table that's in D, does that count for solar panels as well?
I was looking at coverage for impervious as an impervious surface, not for, I guess, what's being the area being occupied.
But that would be in plan view that coverage would still be an area. I mean, impervious surface, there's still going to be runoff associated with it, and it's going to be concentrated flow at that point, just because.
One, if they can't do roof mounted, we could always make it a special use. That way, give us a little more skin in the game as far as setbacks, or where they can go, or the amount of coverage, what it will look like.
That sounds doable.
Opportunity to
talk about it and whatever else.
Talk about it, and if they need one more panel, that's gonna.
I mean, the whole issue really falls back to HOAs, where the biggest concern is, but in the other situations where if somebody decided to put an entire solar farm in their backyard, then the neighbors wouldn't have any opportunity to say, wait a minute, could affect the value of my property or anything else. So,
Question. Yeah.
right. That would be my suggestion of.
Maybe we can make it, industrial is not gonna need the personal scales. There's gonna be the bigger ones, but we can say, put something in as anything that is any ground mounted solar panels in a residential district residentially zoned, that's any specific district, residential district, is required to get a special land use.
Would that go under G, section G, like number 4?
No, that would go in, I think of the section, just the uses permitted uses, special land uses.
One that's not in here, I know that.
Different section,
Yeah.
just be in addition to what is permitted.
So then you wouldn't, would you take this, with this one, would G stay in then? It wouldn't stay.
Yeah, because that would be, it might get moved to section for special land uses. They have additional restrictions to it.
Okay.
With this being restrictions. Because if they fit another panel within that 10 feet,
Right.
Does anybody have any comments about the special land use for a certain extra number of panels that was just discussed?
we want to put a number on just the personal scale of ground
Ground
mounted
mount.
residentially zoned districts.
Okay. I'm okay with that.
And I'll steer clear of the personal scale or ground mounted because there's kind of a difference between the two.
Okay.
But it'll still be, I'll just state personal scale or ground mounted as in a special land use in residential districts.
Okay. I had a question about the maximum size area table because it's kind of inconsistent between what you're allowing per the lot squares, the square footage of the lot versus the maximum area for an accessory structure. And from the markups, there are the, 16,000, which is, a little bit over 0.367 acres to about 0.459 acres. The 16,001 and over 20,000, that's a pretty big lot size for the city of Saline. How many units across the city would that?
I did do these there's a couple hundred of them, believe it or not.
Okay.
Maybe less than 200. And then anything over 20,000 is even less for residential. It was compared to I think there's about 3,000 lots that are zoned residential. It's a very small portion throughout the entire city.
Is there something that's driving adding those 2 additional lines to this table?
It was brought to us more for proportional standards, larger accessory structures for larger lots, just for the sake of proportion.
Okay. And the only reason I'm asking, again, as an engineer, my brain likes numbers. The first line in the table is about 9%. The second line in the table is anywhere between 6.42 to 9.62% of the lot coverage, then 5.25% to around 7%. So it's inconsistent. So I'm just wondering where these numbers, why it's incrementally as it is.
Based off the current 3 or the first 3 on there. So it's an additional 50 square feet. No, that's not 50.
50, and then it goes to 70, and then
Yeah, then it's up to 90, then to
90 again.
90 also. We did look at percentages. Now, percentages would actually lessen the allowable area, even if we went up to 30% of, say, a side yard, 50% of a rear yard, because it varies based on the location of the structures, the primary structure. So this one, at least, this will allow up to 2 as an aggregate, so they could have smaller one side, larger in the rear. But with the percentages, it was all over the place. Then the calculations, they have to go in and then debate over what may or may not be the actual area.
Okay, so this is the this is the total maximum size slash area of the two aggregate
Correct.
80,
This isn't necessarily just for one.
Okay.
You can have up to 2 per residential, with not to exceed that total area.
So if I have a 400 square foot garage and I'm on a 20,000 square foot lot, I can only have an 820 foot additional building? I mean, I'm sorry, 620. Because you're saying it's not, you can't qualify for multiples, you can only qualify for the total of what's for the lot side.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So if you already have an existing building of, like a 10 by 10 building, which is 100 square feet,
It'll be deducted from what the total.
so the
is.
maximum you could have is 830 for a 20,000 square foot.
Correct.
That's helpful, thank you.
Yeah, that's stated,
I just never thought about that until you just mentioned it, so.
section 5.03,
Three.
subsection 3 for detached.
any additional questions that might have shaken out when reviewing this or from the last 2 meetings?
Just a couple. Can you remind me again how fences will play out in this? They're not considered an auxiliary structure or, all right. But how will those play out in terms of the new setbacks? Still not an issue?
Still not an issue. No. No, because you can put a fence right up on the property boundary.
I think it's about, don't you have to be a foot off of the?
3 inches, I think.
In the front yard, it's 3 feet. Rear yard, right up on them, I believe.
I thought it was a foot. Because that's gonna, I mean, that's a concern right now with some of the small setbacks that we have already where buildings are only 3 feet or shorter, and then you get to that point, you can't get in between the buildings when fences go up. So that might be something to consider in the future.
I've considered doing, and I've done this in other communities, a neighbor agreement, where if they want to put it on the lot line, if they have a copy of a certified boundary survey, they can submit that. And then it's up to the installer to put it on that property line, or an agreement between the neighbors that, yeah, we agree that we think that this is where the property line is. That way, there's no, it will still be a civil issue if there's a disagreement, but there's paperwork stating that you agreed or the previous owner agreed at that time. Those tend to work out pretty well unless there's 2 disagreeing neighbors. One would have to get a survey, legal boundary survey, or hold it a foot back at least.
Yeah, because I mean, there's starting to seem like more requests for fences in town than there have been in the past, so it's probably something we need to look at, okay. As I'm looking at definitions, we had a bed and breakfast definition in there, but do we have anything for Airbnb or short-term rentals?
No. So anything that isn't stated is not permitted.
Oh, okay, it works that way.
Ordinances, yes,
All right. So right now, then, we don't permit short-term rentals or Airbnbs.
that is correct.
Okay. The one other thing is, right now, when we look at an expansion, if we do expand ADUs out into other residential areas besides R2 right now,
For EDUs,
for ADUs, yes, this will take precedent for that, correct? In terms of the size of the ADU and stuff you built, or does our, okay,
well,
or do we need to modify our ADU to address that?
modify the ADUs because there seems to be some language that was left out that for short-term rentals.
Right.
That anybody who lives there has to, 6-month minimum. I can't remember, the exact, some of the other language that it has to be incidental. It can't be owner occupied so that they can't rent the house. It can't be sold separately.
But those are part of the ADU,
As part of the-
do not need to be incorporated in this auxiliary unit type thing, or
They-
building.
There is,
Cross over, but,
yeah, there's a minimum, in building code, there's a minimum area that, for livable space. So right now, if somebody wanted to put it on a, 840 square foot ADU, they could. that is a large ADU.
Yes.
So that's gonna, again, it's gonna play into how much space is available. If they go 2 stories, then in certain zoning districts, they can go 24 feet, I believe. If they're building, but if they're building new, it can only be 15, raise that.
No, I think where we ran into one concern was, well, we knew that our minimum size for a structure was bigger than that you would expect to build for a smaller ADU unit.
Correct.
So I didn't know if this will take precedent over that, or the ADU ordinance will address that and make it smaller. So that
You will address it and be smaller, unless it is a second story, then it could be the footprint of the building going up. You know, we don't want somebody has a 900 square foot and then have to narrow it down, but
does that even get, for me, it gets to that 1,020. And then basically, if it's a vertical building, it's much less of an impact than it is a.
Yeah. In no case could it be larger than the principal.
Okay. I had one other question.
Now, speaking of ADUs, I know it's kind of off topic. They are permitted in the R2 district. Now, if you look in the zoning ordinance, in the R3A, R3, maybe R3B, it's anything that's permitted in the R2. So it expands on that already in the zoning district, even though in the current accessory structures, it's limited to the R2, explicitly stated. But
Right, and I think we did it because the issue was being more that we wanted to see it as being in multiple family residential existing already versus putting it into single residential and causing issues
I
there.
want to take out that confusion.
Yeah, I agree. It
Right?
sounds good.
You know, explicitly state somewhere that it, only one place that says R2, but then if you go into the permitted and special land use in the zoning ordinance, it trickles down to other zoning districts. So I just want to take some of that confusion out.
That's it for me right now.
Additional discussion? Is there a motion on the table to acknowledge the receipt of the memo dated May 7th, 2025 from Community Development Director Atkin?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to open the public comment period at 7:33 PM?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All public comments will be heard, a limit of 3 minutes per person.
Not seeing anyone coming forward, I move to close the public hearing.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Comments, questions from planning commission members in addition to our initial discussion?
I just have, I always have a couple of minutes on there, but I don't know if we ought to actually mention them. Maybe we should have to mention them on the record. So I'll just walk through them really quick. They're just really minor. But that's my jam is finding nits, so I apologize. On the section 2.02 definitions A through B, there's just a missing parentheses under accessory dwelling unit ADU. And then the lettering, when you get to these different sections for definitions, gets off at some point. Like 202 goes through R, but then 204 starts back at I, and then 207 starts back at K again. So that all just needs to be tweaked.
Section 202. Where is it?
So 202 ends at R, but then 204
Oh,
starts at I.
yeah, that's because nothing above those were changed, so those that won't change.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, so that this is not the entire,
No.
okay,
no.
sorry. Okay,
Only
then
where
ignore
something
that.
was interjected.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Anything else?
All right, then the only other thing is under section 207, M and M1, and this, I don't think this will change when you change other things. I just wondered if, because you call these accessory structures, And I wondered if changing building to structure and building in M1 to back to structure is just more comprehensive than structure includes a building, but building doesn't include a structure.
That, yeah, okay, that's just the general
Yeah.
name of it, but I see what you're saying.
Just because we have a definition for building and we have a definition for structure, but structure is broader of a definition than building. Yeah, otherwise, that's it.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Just again, when we look at, we took out the definition of garage, and yet we have a number of other definitions for like automobile, all those type of things. Is the accessory structure supposed to be a catch-all for everything?
Yes.
And there's no concerns related to insurance or anything else that the use of that, I guess the use of the accessory structure, so you can use that accessory structure for basically anything now, except,
Yeah. Accessory structure, cover, shed, pole barn, garage. Just to take again, back, I don't know, 10 years ago, the table it identified garage and accessory structure. So you could have an accessory structure up to 200 square feet, but then the garage was the 840 square feet. So just took all that out. That condenses the amount of coverage for accessory structures, and then takes out the guesswork. Well, what is an accessory structure and why it isn't a detached garage one?
and then when I look at it says accessory use, the definition is a use reasonably and customary incidental and subordinate to the principal use of that same lot or property. How do we clearly say that they cannot be used for residential or any other use?
And accessories,
Well, when it says accessory use, so we have an accessory structure and then we call it accessory use. But where do we exclude that? I mean,
accessory use would be a home business, tier 1, tier 2 home business that can be greater than what the primary use is.
but can that building have a bathroom and everything else in it? Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're widening that whole definition quite a bit. And garage clearly made it was a garage for purpose of use of what's automobile storage and so forth. Yeah. All right. That'll be something council can discuss.
Additional questions or comments?
One quick thing. I do know that this was reviewed with the policy committee. Was there any other feedback that came from them or none? Okay.
That was
My understanding that I kind of went through them, so. Right.
Okay, no other discussion. Is there a motion on the table to recommend to Saline City Council to adopt or not adopt the new ordinance 876?
Recommend to adopt.
with amendments.
Move to recommend to adopt with amendments stated on the record.
Just so I'm clear, we're taking the ground mounted and personal scale as a special, making those special uses in section 4.04.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Since that is not going to be something I anticipate being an issue anytime soon, I would like to put that out as a public hearing. Since it's not included, section 4.04 is not included in this public hearing. To make those
Changes.
special land uses, since that changes the intent of the ordinance.
So would you remove those from this in the recommendation moving forward to council?
excuse me, I would leave the sections
A steamy, relaxing
is
spa.
currently, but then at a future date, another planning commission meeting, we'll have a public hearing to make those special land uses in section 4.04. Then they would integrate once everything is approved.
So will you have a period of window where they could actually request it and be able to, and be granted it by right to be able to put poles in?
Short period, I mean, I could turn this thing around by next month. It's not that difficult. Just need that 15-day lead time.
And this is just me thinking this, does it make sense for you to open the public comment period for that 4.04 before we recommend this for adoption? Because by right, I mean, a lot can, I mean, I know it's only a month, but like a lot can change. Things can come through in a month that we might not want to happen.
Yeah, I mean, we should follow practice to make sure it's not going back and forth to council again. So even though, because of that concern now that it needs to be a public hearing, I'd move to postpone this to the next meeting.
The other option would be just take the solar panels out and do it all as one. And let the rest of this go through. It's at the decision of the public.
Because the solar panel's all new at this point, right?
Yeah, yes.
So that'd be section 2.07.
Just, yeah, the definitions, remove the definitions and what the last section for accessory structures, G, section 3.01. Or not, I'm sorry, 5.01.
Could you correct the motion that's there and recommend to us?
The motion would stay the same.
Okay,
And as long as the amendments to remove those until another date, or I can include it all into a different public hearing. The motion remains the same because there are other definitions, other changes through section 2.2 of definitions, 2.02. Then the removal of private garage in 2.04. Okay, I stand corrected. The motion would not include section 2.07 or subsection G, and 5.03.
For you were the mover.
Could I just amend my motion?
Yeah.
I meant my motion to recommend to adopt the new ordinance with the amendments and corrections that we've stated on the record, except that we are excising 2.07 and 5.03G from consideration.
does that cover everything?
Yes, then the solar will just, that stuff will be thrown back into the solar.
You were the seconder. Are you okay with that? Is there additional discussion on the motion?
I think at this point, I think we've answered a lot of questions. Appreciate, being able to have a second run at this. And I think we agree with having a better approach to this. Now we know that we'll be able to deal with this. So moving this forward to the council, I think it's fine, and to let them make their comments at this time is good.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. No new business, no discussion. Is there a motion on the table to excuse the absences of Mayor Morrow and Dan Carroll?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Is there a motion to adjourn at 7:46? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.